It does feel like the B2B world will start moving more towards the B2C world with things like hyper-personalization, for example, and some of the big tech companies do that naturally, and the B2C businesses do that naturally. And I think that'll start to happen in the B2B space.
Welcome to B2B Content Strategist, where we bring you insights and practical tips straight from the minds of top B2B content marketing experts. I'm Amy Woods, founder and CEO of Content 10X, and in each episode, I chat with leading B2B marketers about how they consistently craft and execute successful campaigns, even when faced with tight deadlines and limited resources. If you're looking to elevate and optimize your content marketing efforts, you're in the right place. Keep listening. Hello and welcome to the B2B Content Strategist podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, and in this episode, I'm talking to Neville Vyas, who is the head of marketing for Impax Asset Management in Europe and Asia Pacific. Impax Asset Management manages money for professional investors and institutions around the globe. In this second episode of Season 3, I had a fantastic conversation with Neville. We talked about his role and the structure of his global team. He provides insight into the 6 areas within their global marketing setup and which aspects they will always like to outsource and those that they always like to keep in-house. He also shares why he thinks it's so important to have a well-defined brief, and we talk about a memorable marketing campaign during the pandemic and how video content saved the day. We also touch on the specific regulations around content creation in the asset management sector and how that impacts their use of AI. This really is a fantastic conversation, so let's dive in. Neville, welcome to B2B Content Strategist podcast. It's really great to have you here.
Pleasure to be here, Amy.
Looking forward to this conversation. It's going to be fantastic. To kick things off, could you tell us a bit more about your role and just a little bit about what the organisation does as well? That'd be really useful.
Sure. I'm the head of marketing for Impax Asset Management in Europe and the Asia Pacific. We manage money for professional investors and institutions around the globe, something around $47 billion right now.
Quite a lot, isn't it? Great. And so what does your team look like? How are you structured? What kind of roles, and how have you broken that down?
Well, it's a global team, which I co-lead a global team, largely based in either London or on the East Coast of America. And we've built the team sort of around 6 pillars, if you like, 6 mini teams within the larger marketing team. We've got a digital team, website, email, that sort of thing. A production team that produce the sort of automated type of pieces of content that we need. Quite a lot of content that we produce for our many hundreds of clients. We have a product marketing team that produce the sort of less regular materials and more bespoke materials. We have an events team. And lastly, we have a dedicated design team as well. So those are the kind of 6 areas within our global marketing setup.
Brilliant. And then in terms of keeping, working with people in-house versus the different, aspects that you look to outsource as well, is there anything in particular that you do really prefer to keep as part of the in-house team, and then other aspects where you do sometimes look to outsource to get some external views and expertise?
Yeah, it's a good question. We do outsource to a good extent, I have to say, on the marketing side. I should bring in the comms team into this. They are kind of sitting next to the marketing team, and by comms, I mean the sort of, in old language, maybe you could say the PR team, but they, apart from having journalist relationships and dealing with the media, they also help to produce lots of our insights with the subject matter experts as well. So that's one area, of course, naturally we keep in-house. It's really our own thought leadership that's produced by our own subject matter experts and our portfolio managers and specialists. So typically that kind of thought leadership is generated in-house and kind of created in-house. On the marketing side, the pure marketing side is where we might outsource a little bit more. And actually, we outsource in every one of those 6 areas that I've mentioned. There's some level of outsourcing in digital, production, product marketing, events, and design. So in all of those areas, there's some level of outsourcing.
That makes sense. That's often the answer that we get. Usually outsourcing is often heavily around SEO support, paid ads, social or search type campaigns. We often hear is outsourced, and design aspects as well. It's often an answer that we get.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But actually, we'd go further than that. We're pretty relaxed about outsourcing when we're very busy. So, we're happy that other teams externally can help us. I think where it's easier to outsource is when we're able to deliver a clear brief to that supplier. So if there's sort of quite complex internal navigation within the firm and sort of conversations that need to happen so that we understand what we're trying to do, that's not a nice thing to hand over to somebody externally. That kind of conversation needs to happen internally, and when we sort of feel very ready to hand it over to someone and work with an external partner, we do that. But the conversations, we try and have that internally as much as we can before we bring someone from the outside in.
So in terms of doing more with less, which is a theme that comes up a lot with the marketing teams that I talk to at the moment, it seems to have been a massive thing throughout 2024, this mantra of we're being under pressure to do more with less. Is that something that you are finding as well? Being encouraged to find different ways of doing things within the team, try and do more with less, and to use different tools, different processes, different suppliers, things like that. How have you found that, particularly, in the last year or so?
Yeah, it is a theme. We're well funded, so it's not a strong theme for us, but it's really important that we spend our money wisely and we're efficient with our marketing spend, and we pretty much always think about that anyway. So that's certainly a topic for us. I think we focus on getting the brief right. I would say. I think you, Amy, would understand those issues you face when the original brief isn't quite right and you have to do something again, or recut it and you didn't really think about the audience enough. So we spend as much time as we can thinking about getting the brief right and the strategy right. And that kind of helps long term in terms of a kind of more efficient journey to the end result.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of marketing campaigns, what would you say is one of the most memorable marketing campaigns that you have run?
There's been many memorable campaigns over the years. I've been marketing for around 30 years. So there's a lot I could bring up. But I mean, one more recently that springs to mind is something that we did during COVID, actually. We were working on a business line called private markets area. They invest in infrastructure projects around Europe, sustainable infrastructure projects around Europe. Things like wind farms and solar farms, that sort of thing. Buy, build, and sell would be our sort of process that we use through that journey for clients. Yes, we'd typically send our prospects and clients to go and see the assets. We were sort of preparing for a site visit to a solar farm in Holland, and COVID struck. So there was no traveling, right? Yeah, there's no traveling was going on, and we were scratching our heads, and we just wondered if we could actually do some kind of film or video to replace a site visit. So it's a due diligence visit where prospects would go and see the assets and kick the tires and talk to the local management team. We had to figure out an alternative. So we managed to, frankly, replace that site visit with a film. We hired a team, and a local team, of course, out there, a little bit of external work, and they flew in. We interviewed the people on the ground, the managers of the site. We got a drone up in the air to film the whole solar farm. Yeah. So it was quite a change for us to try and replace a site visit with a video. I mean, I guess the brief or a good outcome would be for the viewer to feel that they were there, really. And we asked the questions that they would normally ask to the local teams, the construction teams. It worked very well. We were really pleased with the outcome. And actually since then, now we don't need to do quite as many site visits as we thought we had to do in the past. And we are replacing some of our site visits with short films. And that works really well. And we raised the assets we were hoping to raise, over 350 million euros into that infrastructure fund. So we were delighted with that. And we were delighted with the campaign. I should say that wasn't the only part of the campaign. It was a rounded, integrated campaign, so it included lots of other tactics as well. But that particular sort of replacement for a site visit worked really well for us.
I love that. I feel like there's a lot of examples of just really inventive and thinking outside of the box in different ways of doing things that came through the restrictions that we had in COVID. And I guess a big thing was that shift to a lot more video content that would have previously been in person. In the same way that a lot of people will talk to me about, the big event that they were going to do, and it was the first time they put on a virtual event instead because we can't bring the people here, so we'll follow a video approach. So it seems like there's lots more, embracing of video content and the power of video, especially through like the tough time that we had. Were you able to do more with the video that replaced the site visit aside from the primary purpose of the video as well? Like, was were there repurposing opportunities for the video itself beyond that because it became a video asset in its own right?
Yeah, good question. And I think very relevant for your team. It's the kind of thing that your team would do very naturally. But eventually, yes, we made some short social media clips from that longer piece. We actually repeated that filming some other assets around Europe, not just a solar farm, but a small hydroelectric plant and then a wind farm as well. We put some of that film together and actually created a short film that we run at events now. So while we've got our stand at the event, we'll have a film running in the background, kind of displaying some of our assets. So yeah, we definitely used that again and again for some other initiatives.
Yeah, repurpose the video and repurpose the entire concept and the idea to other campaigns as well, which is brilliant. So talking about repurposing, what a great segue into that. So as you mentioned, we're all about repurposing. I kind of live and breathe evangelizing the power of repurposing. And I'd love to know, with all the different types of content that you and your team create, what is your favorite type of content that you like to create from a repurposing perspective, knowing that when you create that, that you're going to maximize and get as much as you can from that particular type of content?
I think we've talked about video, and I have to say that is a favorite. You'll know that if you make a slightly longer version of a film video, you can cut it down. You can cut it down, and you can cut it down for different purposes. I guess the shortest one of those would be something on social media, but there are other purposes as well. So that's a favorite format of ours. But I'll mention one particular team that we work with that are specialists in the asset management industry. It's a business called Asset TV. They, like you, are very skilled at editing films. Because they're specialists in asset management or that world, their distribution list is very powerful. So it's really important that once you've made the content, you're able to put it in front of your clients and prospects. Their distribution list is 600,000 professional investors around the world. And that's a lot bigger than Impax and many other asset managers. So when we do that kind of content creation and the sort of recutting, we never forget that in the end, it needs to be amplified. And people like Asset TV are outstanding at that kind of amplification work.
What are they? Are they mainly focusing on social, or is that through email, like, the email list that they have and things like that? What are their main distribution channels?
Good question. It is social, but actually it's their proprietary database that's the magic that they have. It's their own database of 600,000 professional investors around the world. And that's hard to maintain for any asset manager. And that's really something very powerful. And we make sure that we can use that to good effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to know, as well as, we were talking about video content, you guys are excellent at creating, really good written content as well. Your insights, your reports, great articles, things like that. And I know you mentioned that you really do like to keep some of the really key thought leadership content very much in-house, working with your experts and developing those insights and points of view for your own content channels. Do you have any particular processes and rigor around extracting key insights from the long-form written pieces, the reports, the white papers, the more cornerstone articles, into different distribution channels and just kind of repurposing it both, I guess, down and up into bigger pieces as well?
Yeah, we do. I think you'll, I guess, know, Amy, that it's easier to cut down than build up. So with our written pieces, we'll typically start with the full story, and it might be quite a long report. In our world, 10 or 20 pages would be quite a substantial piece of thought leadership on any given topic. It might take half an hour to read. And that's, I think for us, that's a good starting point to get everything down there in writing, the whole story. Then cutting it down into smaller bite-sized chunks is a lot easier. We don't often go the other way, if I'm honest, and sort of add information in. So we'd start with the longest possible part of the story and then bring it down into smaller bite-sized chunks from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And try and find those different distribution channels for the shorter content and people who are, I guess, at different stages of the marketing funnel and sales funnel as well, which is super important. Just a super quick break from this conversation to let you know that if you're a B2B technology or professional services company and you want help with streamlining your content operations, outsourcing your content repurposing is the number one way to produce more high quality content and boost your ROI without putting any more pressure on your team. In fact, it could save your team up to 30 hours per week. We offer content repurposing services for video and audio content. Whether you have a show or you're launching a brand new one, maybe you have an archive of awesome content, be it webinars or a virtual event, or you want help creating thought leadership content that we can repurpose, we've got you covered. Head to content10x.com to see how we can help you and start increasing your efficiency and the value you get from your content. Now back to the conversation. Are there any particular tools that you're loving at the moment, or you and your team are really loving to use, like specific tools that are aiding the marketing content creation processes?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've got some in-house tools that we use. I think ones that your listeners will be familiar with, kind of MS, the Microsoft suite that we sort of generally use. But the more complex stuff, you asked about external suppliers, and we do partner up with a business called Instinct Digital. Again, they're asset management specialists, so they're well-versed. Their strength is data visualization. So in asset management, there's a lot of data about, portfolios and performance and attribution analysis. They're able to sort of suck that in from us, and they then replay it back in a really user-friendly format. So we just started to work with them. They're about the best in the field in terms of data visualization for asset managers. And I'm really looking forward to some of the work that I know we'll produce with them. I know it'll be great. And I think in the coming months, when you look at the Impax website, you'll start to see a really clear set of data that's easy to navigate and actually interactive as well. So we are working with businesses, external businesses, for the really complex sort of data visualization work. And I'm really excited about that, actually.
Awesome. And where do you stand on AI? I just want to briefly touch on this, but are you and the team, are you trying to embrace this world of generative AI? Do you have caution with it, or where in the spectrum would you put your team at the moment in the AI?
It's a bit of both, Amy. We're welcoming it. Of course, it's a great opportunity to just do better work. We are cautious in the sense that we're a regulated business. Financial services tends to be regulated, and regulated or not, you just have to be very careful with client data or our internal data. So anything that involves client data or anything sensitive, we put to one side. There's separate teams talking about how AI could work with that kind of information. From the marketing side, we only work with AI with general information. So yes, we use AI. It is already helpful to us in terms of just kind of helping us articulate better and tell stories in a different way and some of our copywriting. So we're using it now. It is helpful, but with general inputs rather than any specific inputs. So we're a little bit cautious in that respect. Well, we're very cautious in that respect, but it is a helpful tool and we are embracing it. And actually some of our partner firms like Instinct Digital and Asset TV already using AI for their businesses. So we're really open-minded and quite excited about the potential there as well.
Yeah, and I think you're, very much the same as us in terms of, you're right in terms of, you need to embrace it, but you do need to be cautious and you need to be aware of the legal considerations, legal and ethical considerations with many of these Gen AI tools. And I think we sound quite similar to you. We're dipping our toes in and we're interested in more how it can aid, for example, maybe the start and the end of processes, so, aspects of ideation and aspects of proofreading and things like that, but not the actual creation of content so much. And also, it's just really fascinating to me, the legal implications and the fact that I don't think everybody fully understands that anything that you put into the generative AI tools is then basically owned by that, and it will process that, like it will ingest it like a big machine, and then it will spit it out to someone else. So you better not give anything proprietary or anything that you don't want the Gen AI to just take what you just gave it and then spit it out to somebody else somewhere else, which is what can happen. Yeah,
exactly, Amy. That's a good point. By definition, it's learning from the inputs that it's had in the past. So you just have to think about what you're inputting.
Yeah, you do. And I won't go. It's a whole. In fact, it is an entire separate podcast episode that I recorded recently. So I won't go too far there. But just to say that in the episode that I did recently, we were talking about as well the fact that when you get provided with information from generative AI tools, that they do absolutely no check whatsoever as to whether that is proprietary, whether it could infringe on any IP, copyright, trademark, etc. So anything that it spurts out to you as well, you proceed with caution. Like even it will give you something and you could go ahead and share it. I'm not even talking about fact checking, because I think that's obvious that you should fact check anything, but even just the tools that develop creative, they could actually take something that is completely copyrighted by a big brand. Like, Chanel have a trademark on the very specific way that the C curls into the other C and stuff, and you could just say generate a logo and it looks like that, and before you know it, you've said, well, AI gave it to me, and it's like, doesn't matter, you've just infringed on trademark and all that. Anyway, it's a whole other world, but I think we sound very similar. We're open-minded, embracing it, keen to see, testing it, but not exactly, full force, still very cautionary. It was great to hear you talk about the brilliant campaign that you did and the way that you were able to, in many ways, repurpose a site visit into a video that went on and achieved what you wanted and more. What about the opposite? So do you have any maybe cautionary tales of any campaigns that perhaps didn't quite work as you intended, or just missed the mark, or any kind of lesson learned or tales that from any point in your career, not even the current role at the moment, but where something maybe didn't quite go to plan and why?
Sure, yeah, no, there's plenty of that. There's plenty of that over the last 30 years in many of the firms I've worked with. Let me speak in general terms. A typical sort of a typical stumbling block for me, my teams, and I guess many marketing people is that moment of not getting the brief right. So, we want to be helpful marketing folks. We're a helpful bunch. We want to get on with the work, and so we'll often just start the work. We'll start making the brochure, writing it, start making the film, start typing in the social media, start planning the event. And I think that's where the mistakes are often made. I have written brochures, made films, made videos, and at some point in the conversation during the production process, somebody quite rightly says, just remind me, what are we actually trying to achieve with this? And, you just think, okay, yeah, I've kind of forgotten, and that kind of that big question gets lost in the journey, in the excitement of getting on with the work. And that's where mistakes are made, because actually you just produce something that doesn't meet that particular brief for that particular client. So that still happens. I mean, even today, in small ways, we miss the mark sometimes. It can happen in a big way, and it has in the past. And we just got to be really cognizant of of not getting the brief right, and just pausing early on in the conversation. Who is this for? What is it trying to achieve? Once that target has digested the marketing, video, brochure, insights, whatever it is, what do you want them to think? Think, feel, and do. Typical marketing speak, but it's true. What do you want? Do you want them to feel something in particular or do something in particular? What is that? Marketing people are quite good at asking that question and understanding what that means and being able to respond to it. Non-marketing people struggle a little bit. You can see their eyes glaze over a little bit if you say, what do you want them to do after they've read the brochure? Well, I don't know. So that takes a bit of thought and a bit of eking out. That's marketing skill, to be able to eke out the good answers to those questions. And then the outcome is better if you've got the strategic brief right.
Yeah, I think that's such an excellent answer, and I can just completely relate in terms of, it is really easy sometimes to have a really clear purpose and brief and audience and intention and, the emotion you want to invoke and stuff, but then you go down certain rabbit holes and stuff and start to lose that, as you were saying, and you might get to a point and someone questions and you realise, oh, I maybe have gone a bit too far here in a different direction. And yeah, I guess thank God for the person who sometimes is just able to see the wood for the trees because they're a bit further back to be able to ask that question. And then you have to have the resolve sometimes, don't you, to think, well, even though we have put a lot of work into this, we either keep going knowing we've gone off track or we stop and do something different and pivot and have the resolve to know that just because you put so much work in doesn't mean you then plough on if you've lost track of the ultimate purpose of the campaign and the piece. And that's not easy, is it?
It's not easy. It's a really good point. And that's leadership, when you have to pause for a moment and make that big decision. Guys, we've kind of gone in the wrong direction. You might put your hands up and say, it's my fault. That doesn't matter. Like, can we fix it, or do we have to just do something differently? So those are the big decisions. And yes, there's some time and money invested sometimes that needs to be addressed. I mean, a really simple question in amongst those big questions about what emotions do we want to evoke is budget. And sometimes we forget to even ask that question, because is the budget £50? Fine. Or is it £50,000? Fine. Now, and most marketing people know that's a different, between those two lines, that's totally different campaigns. £50,000, you can do something quite serious with that. With £50, you can still do something. With nothing, you can still do something with your own talent, with your own skills, and that's okay, but you just need to know early on, and that sets the tone for the kind of campaign that you're about to step into. And if you ask about mistakes, I have gone back to my stakeholders with huge campaign ideas, and they'll say, yeah, this is great, Neville, but there's no budget.
There's no budget.
Right. So, okay, sorry, I didn't think to ask that question, and now I do.
And I think that comes down to a really key theme that we've had through this discussion, which is the importance of the brief, isn't it? And getting that absolutely nailed down and correct and understood by all. So, yeah. Looking into your crystal ball, what do you think the future of B2B marketing and content is going to start looking like going, sort of, don't know how far you want to go, because even, I'll say 5 years, because even that's 20 years in some other industries. But is there any direction you think we're going in, or certain innovations that you think we're going to see in the marketing sphere?
I do, yeah. I think you may have heard this in previous conversations, but it does feel like the B2B world will start moving more towards the B2C world, with things like, hyper-personalization, for example, and some of the big tech companies sort of do that naturally, and the B2C businesses do that naturally and really personalize messages according to the target market. I think that'll start to happen in the B2B space, particularly with the sort of introduction of new technologies. So using technology itself in the B2B world, it will increase, I think, for sure. I mean, that's an easy one at the moment. At Impax, for example, we're already using technologies like Salesforce, databases like Salesforce and Marketo on the email side, and Seismic on the sort of content library side. Between those three big pieces of technology, you can create really wonderful outputs, and you can really personalize your messages. So, and I think we're scratching the surface in asset management, but I think there's a lot more to go there. The other area where I think there'll be more work is in storytelling. Yeah, asset management typically is very data led. That's fine, and very logical. That's okay. But there's also a storytelling part to what we do when we go to the marketplace. The companies that we invest in, they all do interesting things. They all do interesting things to help the transition to a more sustainable economy, which is where Impax invests, for example. And we invest in some companies that have got some great stories about how they clean water or how they clean air or how they can, work in the green economy generally and what they can do with food production, etc. So there's some great stories to be told, and I think we forget that in asset management sometimes. So I think there'll be some more storytelling. I hope there'll be some more storytelling that happens in the coming years. And I think lastly, then it sort of leads me on to the greenwashing issue. There's quite a few companies that in the past have maybe overstated their case in terms of how they deal with the environment, for example. And they've not been as authentic as they could be, as they should have been. And I think that over time, that's going to start to get called out a bit more in the coming years.
I agree completely. Yeah, great answer. Thank you. Okay, so 2 final questions for you. So first one, so every episode we ask a previous guest to ask a question to the next guest. So they don't know who you are, but they know that you're going to be a leader in the B2B marketing space. So your question is from Katie Morley, Global Content Director. So she asks,
if you are new into a director role or a leadership role in a content marketing function tasked with building out a content marketing plan, and no one's done it before, and you're the first leader to come in and be tasked with content strategy, what is your best advice and where do you start?
I think this should be no surprise to you, Amy, but I would start with the brief. You just have to. I mean, you almost don't worry about content to start with. Content is one of the tactics to deliver a marketing brief. It doesn't always have to be at the center of a marketing brief. There's other things you can do to communicate your message. And this has to be written down and played back to the stakeholders, but it is, who's the target audience? What countries are they in? What's important to that particular audience? What's less important to that particular audience, which is quite a useful thing to know? What do they know about our business already? They may be very familiar with the business, so you don't have to sort of introduce the business again. What do they know about the industry? Where are they in the level of sophistication? What's the follow-up going to be once you've done this piece of work? What is the next step? What tone of voice might you want to use in that content? Humorous, serious, a little bit light touch? Short? Do they have very short attention spans, or do they have some time to think? And is it sort of long copy type of work, if I may say that? So it's maybe not the answer that gives you the immediate plan, but the plan that you produce, that whoever produces that plan, will be so much better once you understand the strategic issues. And then the plan will fall out of that. It tends to naturally fall out once you've got the strategic questions answered.
Yeah, absolutely love that. It does answer the question perfectly. Where do you start? And you're exactly right. That's a fantastic answer. So the next question, it turns it on to you, actually. As I mentioned, your question came from Katie Morley. So for our next guest onto the B2B Content Strategist podcast, you don't know who they are, but you do know that they are a leader in the B2B marketing space like yourself. So if you imagine being in a room full of peers in similar roles, similar level, and you had a chance to just ask something and learn from the room, what would you ask?
Wow. I think my question would be about prioritization. Most marketing leaders are faced with a good suite of products to promote. I have the pleasure of that challenge right now. Some really a great product range, a long list of countries to where the target market sits right now. Long list of countries in Europe and around the world. So I've got a long list of countries, a long list of potential products that they might be interested in, and a limited budget in terms of money and in terms of resource. So how do you begin to prioritize where you start, what you do in the beginning, middle, and end of the marketing journey? Prioritization. How do you begin to prioritize? That's a difficult one.
Yeah, It's a difficult one and it's a great question. And I'm going to really enjoy hearing the answer to that from our next guest. So thank you so much. Well, it's been a really, really great conversation. Really enjoyed talking with you today. Where would you like anyone to connect with you or let you know if they listen to the podcast?
I think LinkedIn's it's a great platform. So if you want to drop me a line on LinkedIn, that's fine. That's a good place to catch up with me.
Cool. Brilliant. Well, we'll put the link to yourself on LinkedIn in the podcast show notes so people can check that out. So really all that's left to say is just thank you so much for coming onto the show. It's been a really great conversation. I know the listeners are going to get lots from it. So, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Amy, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of B2B Content Strategist. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Feel free to connect with me on social media. You can find me, Amy Woods, founder of Content 10X, on LinkedIn. If you get in touch, please do leave a message and let me know that you listen to B2B Content Strategist. You can also connect with Content 10X. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And for more insights on optimizing your content marketing and the power of repurposing, head over to content10x.com. You'll discover valuable resources to help you maximize the impact of your content. We have our sister podcast, the Content 10X podcast, hundreds and hundreds of blog posts, and a library full of free resources and guides, all about how to be a better content creator and content repurposer. If you're seeking consulting support or a trusted partner to handle your content creation, repurposing and distribution, then also reach out to us. We offer a world-class, fully managed service that takes care of as much or as little as you need when you need it. Once again, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I'll catch you in the next one.